Hello everyone, this is Puka and welcome back to our beginner series for players just getting started off in the Pokemon TCG. We have some simple but powerful decks to help you kind of jump into the competitive side of the game without breaking the bank too much. So in this video we're going to be covering a Rayquaza Emboar deck, otherwise known as Rayboar. So let's just jump right into it and take a look at the deck's contents and what we'll be working with. So our center of the deck is Emboar. It has the ability Inferno Fandango. As often as you like during your turn, you may attach a fire energy card from your hand to one of your Pokemon. So this allows you to bypass the 1 energy per turn rule. You just get to keep playing as many fire energy as you want in a turn. That's pretty much it. Allows you to power up your Pokemon very quickly. This is pretty much the same ability as Blastoise's Deluge, but it's for fire energy instead of water. So we get to take advantage of different kinds of Pokemon. So in this deck, we're going to run 4 of Tepig. He is your basic Pokemon. You need to get him out very quickly. We'll play 1 of Pignite. It might seem strange that we only play 1 of the middle line, but we'll get to that in a second. And then 4 Emboar, just to try to get this out as quickly as possible. So we have a very heavy Emboar line. We really only need to get 1 Emboar in play. He'll sit on your bench and just allow you to attach energy the entire game. But we need to get him out quickly. So we'll play 4 of them in this deck. Now we skip on the Pignite because we play 4 Rare Candy. This allows you to skip from Tepig to Emboar so we can get it out a turn faster and just completely bypass the stage 1. It's a pretty cool card, really helps with your stage 2 Pokemon to get them into play. So that's that. We want to get Emboar out as quickly as possible. That is the strategy. But what do we want to power up once we actually get Emboar into play? Well, our main attacker is going to be Rayquaza EX. It has Dragon Burst. You can discard either all your basic fire energy or all your basic lightning energy attached to this Pokemon. And it does 60 damage times the number of energy cards you discarded. So say you have 1 lightning and then 3 fire energy attached to Rayquaza EX. We could then use Dragon Burst, discard all 3 fire energy, and Dragon Burst would do 180 damage. This is good enough to knock out just about every Pokemon in the game. So this is your main attacker. Once you get going, you can knock out just about everything in 1 hit. It's a very, very powerful Pokemon, and it's going to be your main attacker pretty much most of the time. Now, we do have some side attackers as well. Sometimes EX Pokemon have some limitations, or we don't want to give up the 2 prize cards that they give up when an EX Pokemon is knocked out. So we run some regular attackers as well. First one is Rayquaza. As Dragon Pulse does 40, and then you discard the top 2 cards of your deck. We usually don't want to use that attack. What we want to do is Shred. For a fire, lightning, and a colorless energy, we can do 90 damage, and then it ignores all effects. So this can go through all sorts of things, like abilities, and maybe like an agility attack or an Eviolite. There are all sorts of effects this can go through, but the important thing is it does apply weakness. That is the big thing. So, we can still hit other dragon-type Pokemon for weakness, since pretty much all dragons are weak to dragon. So, for example, if we were facing someone else using this Rayquaza EX, which is weak to dragon, instead of using our own and getting into, this back-and-forth battle between our 2 prize Pokemon, you could switch it up and use Shred, which would do 180 damage to the Rayquaza EX instead. Now, our other attacker is Reshiram. It has Blue Flare. It's the attack you're going to want to use most of the time. It's a fire Pokemon, so it gives you more type coverage. There are a lot of fire-weak Pokemon out there. It does 120 damage for 2 fire and 1 colorless. Discard 2 fire energy, but that's a pretty big attack that can knock out everything that's weak to fire. So this is a very good card to have at your disposal as well. Now, normally Emboar decks do run the super expensive card, Tropical Beach, but since this is a beginner deck, we're not going to run that. Instead, we're going to run a 2-2 line of, 2 Voltorb and then 2 Electrode. This allows you to keep drawing cards constantly throughout the game. Magnetic Draw once during your turn. You may draw until you have 4 cards in your hand. Pretty simple, but it allows you to keep drawing through cards so that you can find the right things later in the game. This version will be a little bit slower than the ones that run Tropical Beach, but it gets very strong because once everything starts coming together, we rarely miss a turn of attacking because Magnetic Draw will allow us to keep having cards in our hand to use to power up our attackers. So there are the Pokemon. Then we have the trainers, which are pretty simple here. Every deck is probably going to have 4 Professor Juniper. Discard your hand and draw 7 cards. Very powerful draw card. Very, very good. Then we'll have N, another card that most decks will play 4 of. Each player shuffles in their hand, and then each player draws cards for how many prizes they have remaining. So if you have 6 prizes, you draw 6 cards. If you have 1 prize, you only draw 1 card. So this is very good early on, and later in the game you can use it to disrupt an opponent. And it won't affect you as much drawing those low numbers of cards if we have Electrode in play. So it works out pretty well. The other supporters we have are Chorus. Now this is kind of the opposite of N. Bad at the beginning, good at the end for drawing cards. Shuffle your hand into your deck. Draw a number of cards equal to the number of benched Pokemon in play. So this can be anywhere from 0 to 10. We don't want to draw 0. 0 is bad, but 10 is very good. Usually you get a number somewhere in between there, but very strong card. And then we have 3 Skyla. Search your deck for a trainer card and put it into your hand. This can allow you to search for any trainer card you want, which we'll get into, right now. We already saw Rare Candy, which can allow us to skip from Tepig to Emboar. A lot of the time we use Skyla to search for that. Could also search for Ultra Ball. Discard 2 cards and then search for a Pokemon. This allows us to find whatever we need immediately. We can search for, if we need an Emboar, we can get an Emboar. If we need a Rayquaza, we can grab that. And sometimes it can turn into an Electrode, which will draw us extra cards. We also have Level Ball. Search your deck for a Pokemon with 90 HP or less. This is good. It can search out Tepig, Voltorb, or Electrode. Normally we want it so that we can play a Skyla, search for a Level Ball, and then get a Tepig. So then we can get Emboar out on the next turn. Then we have the most important item card in the deck, Superior Energy Retrieval. You discard 2 cards from your hand, and then take back 4 basic energy cards from your discard pile, and put them right into your hand. So this allows you to keep attacking with Rayquaza EX's Dragon Burst. Every turn you can just Dragon Burst, discard 3 or 4 energy, however many you need, and then next turn play Superior Energy Retrieval, get back the energy you discarded, attach them again with Inferno Fandango, and once again Dragon Burst for a knockout. So this deck, once it gets in motion, it's a constant stream of big attacks. We also have Energy Search. This just allows you to search for an energy card. Pretty simple. It's self-explanatory. We play this because we do run 2 different types of energy, and we can play a Skyla to grab Energy Search and search for the energy that we want. We also play 2 Switch. Since a lot of our Pokemon have high retreat costs, we want to play Switch to get them out of the active spot if they ever get stuck there somehow. And then we also have 1 Computer Search. This is your Ace Spec card. You can only play 1 Ace Spec card in your deck. For this one, since we're just aiming on getting set up, we're going to play Computer Search. It's discard 2 cards and then search for any card. This is probably the best overall Ace Spec card in terms of achieving your setup as quickly as possible. So that's the trainers and the Pokemon. Then we just have 9 Fire Energy and 3 Lightning Energy. Now this may seem like not very many because, we have to be discarding so many all the time. But because we run 4 Superior Energy Retrieval, this is usually enough. As long as you manage your resources properly, this is pretty much always going to be enough. So this is just a starting list. You can change it if you want, but this is a good starting point for beginner players. Very interesting to note, this deck is very, very inexpensive for the most part. The entire Emboar line, this Rayquaza, and Reshiram are all in the Legendary Treasure set. Also, Rayquaza EX is a promo card you can get, which is not very expensive either. And Electro is probably a pretty cheap card too. So all of the Pokemon really won't cost you very much money. So this is actually a pretty strong starter deck that won't cost you a whole lot. But enough of my talking, let's get to a game that I played with the deck. And we'll see how Rayboar works in action. So we're going to go up against a player named Following Ravens. Looks like I will be going first. And we start off with a Rayquaza EX. We usually want to start off with that one since it has a 1 retreat cost as opposed to regular Rayquaza's 3 retreat cost. And also Rayquaza EX is pretty much going to be our attacker all the time. So we'll start off by attaching a Fire Energy and then I'll play an N to get 6 fresh cards. And thankfully we get this Tepig, which we'll go ahead and put on the bench and pass. Not a bad first turn. We got our Tepig into play. That's the important thing here. And my opponent seems to be playing some deck with Mewtwo EX and Terrakion. We'll see what else that comes with. But we're going to try to focus on setting up our strategy rather than worrying about the opponents this game. So we do see a computer search from my opponent, discarding a Pokemon catcher and a Skyla. So he'll get to search for any one card, which goes for a double colorless energy. Goes on to the Mewtwo EX. So my opponent will be able to attack me on the first turn. And I'll get hit by X-Ball for 60 damage. Now we have some interesting choices here. We have a lot of supporter cards here. But there's no way for us to directly get an Emboar into play this turn. So we have a couple options. First of all, we could either just play the N or the Professor Juniper and hope to draw Rare Candy and Emboar. That wouldn't be a bad plan. That would give us a chance to get it into play. I wouldn't mind that. But I think for the purpose of this video, we'll just take a more conservative route and play a Skyla. Just search for an Ultra Ball so that we can get Pignite into play. And then next turn we'll get the Emboar. And then we'll start, really getting into gear. So we'll go ahead and discard 2 Fire Energy with the Ultra Ball, grabbing a Pignite. We can always get those fire back later with Superior Energy Retrieval, so not too worried about it. And then we'll use Dragon Burst for 60 damage. It's not the most powerful thing on the second turn, but once we start getting Emboar out, look out. This Rayquaza EX is going to do a ton of damage. So my opponent does play a Pokemon catcher, bringing out our Pignite. Uh-oh. That's not good. And then a Hypnotoxic Laser that's going to poison our Pignite. Fortunately, it does have a 100 HP, which is pretty darn solid for a Stage 1 Pokemon that is going to evolve again. And alright, we're fortunate enough to draw Emboar, so we'll evolve right into that. And then we'll just play a Professor Juniper and draw 7 fresh cards here. Now, Emboar has a monstrous retreat cost. Actually costs 4 to retreat. And we didn't actually get the greatest hand. But, we can do something here. We can play out all of our cards and really go for a big explosive turn. So let's just go for it, since we don't have any supporter cards. We can play the Superior Energy Retrieval, get back 3 Fire Energy cards, and then Inferno Fandango once, twice, thrice, and 4 times, and actually retreat to the Rayquaza EX. And then we can play 1 more Superior Energy Retrieval, get back all 4 Fire Energy again, and then Inferno Fandango again and power up Rayquaza EX. We can just attach as many Fire Energy as we want. It's pretty awesome. I actually went overboard and attached 1 extra one. Oops. I only needed to discard 2 since we already did 60 before, but yeah, what the heck. We'll just overkill that Mewtwo. And just like that, we have taken 2 prize cards. and we're well on our way to victory. You know, we have some damage on our Pokemon, but we're all set up for the most part. We just need to start drawing some supporter cards, and it looks like our opponent is going to help us out a bit with an N there, giving us 4 fresh cards, and now we got some supporters to work with. So we'll probably play the Professor Juniper this turn to draw 7. But before we do, we'll play an Ultra Ball to search for another Pokemon. I'm feeling a little vulnerable. My opponent does play Pokemon Catcher, which could drag out Emboar. So I want to make sure I have another Tepig ready in case that Emboar does go down. I want to be able to evolve a new one. And then we'll play the Professor Juniper here, and we draw 2 more Fire Energy. So we'll Inferno Fandango, 2 more onto the Rayquaza EX, bench the Reshiram, and then Dragon Burst, discarding the Fire Energy, and we'll do 180 damage again, wiping out another EX Pokemon just like that. We may be in some trouble. That Terrakion can come out and use Retaliate and knock out Rayquaza EX, but we do have a 4-prize lead right now, so things are actually looking very, very good for us. So we'll go ahead and take our 2 prizes, and we are well on our way to victory, I would say. We still have 2 superior energy retrievals remaining in the deck, which means we can still attack at least 2 more times, and that's going to be perfect, because we only need to take 2 more prize cards. So we do see a Keldeo EX come down, and a Professor Juniper from the opponent. All my opponent needs is 1 energy in order to attack my Rayquaza EX, and then Retaliate will finish it off. But it seems like my opponent's going to use Rush in with Keldeo EX. And that was kind of a strange move. But hey, it's good for us, since we can computer search for the superior energy retrieval, discard 2 more cards, get back 4 Fire Energy, and there we go. That's the game. We can Inferno Fandango all of those Fire Energy onto the Rayquaza EX. We only need 3. And then Dragon Burst for 180 damage. Once again, and look at that. Just 3 attacks, 3 knockouts, and that is the game. So that should show you how powerful Rayboar really is. And it's pretty simple to use once you set up. All you have to do is keep attacking, and, well, that's it. Very powerful deck that can beat just about anything. So hope this was very informative. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments, and hope you enjoyed. This is Puka from the Top Cut. I will have some more videos for you guys soon, and I will see you guys next time.